I still can't look at any pictures of her because it just breaks my heart.
She was just behind him. He could still hear her voice when he turned to keep going. But when he came back, she was gone. At over 8,000 meters above sea level, every step is a risk. The air is too thin, the wind is too strong, and time is never on your side. Rob and Maria were experienced climbers. They knew the dangers. They had trained for years, but nothing could prepare them for what happened on Mount Everest. What started as a shared dream became a fight for survival. A moment's decision turned into a heartbreaking loss. This is the true story of what happened on the mountain and why one man came down alone. Dr. Maria Strydom was full of energy, a high achiever with a deep love for life. One of the things she loved most was climbing, especially with her husband Rob. Rob had been climbing since he was a kid. When he was just 8 years old, he summited his first peak in Australia's Cathedral Range, and from that moment, he never stopped. He later met Maria while studying veterinary science at Queensland University. She was earning a degree in finance, but after they got married and moved to Melbourne, Maria caught Rob's passion for the mountains. Together, they set an ambitious goal: to climb some of the world's highest peaks, ending with the ultimate challenge, Mount Everest. They were both experienced, but Everest was in a league of its own. It was dangerous. Their families knew that and asked them many times if they were sure about this climb. Just weeks before their departure, they sent their wills to their families. Maria's mother even flew to Melbourne just to say goodbye. She had a feeling she needed to see her daughter one more time. Still, even with the risks, everyone believed Rob and Maria would come home, just like they always had before. The year was 2016. Just 1 year earlier, a devastating 7.8 magnitude earthquake had rocked Nepal and nearby countries. It was one of the worst disasters the region had seen. Entire communities were destroyed, and thousands of lives were lost. On Everest alone, 22 people died at base camp that year. No one reached the summit in 2015. The whole season had been canceled. So when the mountain reopened in 2016, climbers from around the world were eager to return. Expedition companies were back in business. Tents were set up. Teams were ready. Among them were Rob and Maria. They had arrived with 3 Sherpas and started their climb using the South Col route. The process would take weeks. Acclimatization is critical on Everest. You go up to a higher camp, stay a day or so, then come back down to rest. You repeat this again and again to help your body adjust to the thin air. Rob and Maria followed this routine for 6 weeks, going up and down the mountain, waiting for the perfect window to reach the summit. By mid-May, Rob and Maria were finally ready. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, no storms, which is rare on Everest. They left Camp 3, sitting at about 7,162 meters, just before midnight. The goal was to reach Camp 4, deep inside the death zone, by early morning. Everything felt heavier now. It took nearly 2 hours just to get ready and start moving. At that altitude, even basic tasks become exhausting. The temperature was below -30. Visibility was low, with only the glow of their headlamps lighting the way as they moved slowly across the ice and rock. Back home, their families watched their progress through a satellite tracker. That was the only connection they had, and all they could do was wait and hope. Around 11 a.m., Rob and Maria reached Camp 4, more than 8,000 meters high, officially inside the death zone. They were behind schedule, but they still had time to rest and prepare for the final push. Just a few hours later, at 7 p.m., they would begin their summit attempt, the final climb. At 7 p.m., Rob, Maria, and their 3 Sherpa guides began the final climb to the summit. The sky was still clear, nearly perfect conditions. The plan was to reach the top and be back at Camp 4 within 12 hours. But just like before, their pace was too slow. Maria was struggling. As they reached the south summit, her condition started to worsen. Her body was giving out. It had already been 14 hours inside the death zone, and both of them were showing signs of high-altitude sickness. Their oxygen was running low. But Rob had what many climbers call summit fever, that powerful need to reach the top no matter what. In his exhausted, foggy state, he asked Maria if she'd be okay waiting while he finished the climb. Maria, not wanting to hold him back from the dream he'd chased for so long, said yes. She stayed at the south summit with one of the Sherpas, while Rob continued on. She was just steps away from the top, but her body couldn't take another step. A few hours later, Rob reached the summit of Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth. He had dreamt of this moment since he was a kid, but as he stood there, above the clouds, something was missing. It wasn't what he expected. Maria wasn't with him. He took a single photo, one moment to remember it. But he didn't linger. There was no joy in this victory. He was exhausted, disoriented, and starting to hallucinate. On the way down, Rob could barely walk. He was sliding along sections of the mountain, stopping, trying to catch his breath, then sliding again. Still, somehow, he made it back to the south summit, to the spot where he'd left Maria. But she wasn't there anymore. She had already started making her way back down with her Sherpa. Both of them were in bad shape. Every step took all the strength they had. They'd take a few steps, fall, slide a bit, rest, then try again. 10 meters at a time. That was all they could manage. Maria was doing everything she could to get back down to Camp 4. She was weak, but she kept going, step by step, until she couldn't anymore. Eventually, she had to be carried the rest of the way. It was around 2 in the morning when she finally made it into a tent. She'd been in the death zone for nearly 31 hours. Inside the tent were 6 other climbers, and Maria was barely conscious. She wasn't responding to anyone, just whispering that she wanted to see her husband. Meanwhile, Rob was still up on the mountain, trying to make his way back. At one point, he collapsed on the trail and actually fell asleep. On Everest, in the death zone, falling asleep can be fatal. By pure luck, another group of climbers happened to be heading up at that moment. They found Rob, checked his oxygen, he was out, and urged him to keep moving. Somehow, he did. When Rob finally made it back to Camp 4, he was barely standing. Someone told him Maria was there, but her condition wasn't good. She was on oxygen now and had eaten a little, but she was still fading in and out of consciousness. Base camp was calling in updates. They told the climbers to do everything they could to keep her awake, because if she fell asleep again, she might not wake up. They were also trying to organize a rescue, but at that altitude, it was impossible. The only hope was to get Maria down to Camp 3, below the death zone. By morning, the sun had come up, and Maria's condition was all over the place. One moment she was clear and able to speak. The next, she was confused and hallucinating. Still, she could walk, and that meant they had a chance. There was no other option. They had to get moving. Every second in the death zone was pushing her body closer to the edge. So Rob and Maria, both barely able to walk, began the slow, painful descent toward Camp 3. They were making progress, even if it was just inch by inch. Finally, they dropped below 8,000 meters. It felt like the first bit of hope all night. But just when it looked like they might make it, tragedy hit. Maria lost her footing. She slipped, tangled herself in the safety line, and slid a few feet off the route. Rob rushed to her. He called out, forced himself to her side, and wrapped his arms around her. But it was too late. Her body had reached its limit. Maria died there, in Rob's arms, just after they escaped the death zone. Rob eventually made it off the mountain. Physically, he was in bad shape, his body severely affected by frostbite. But the emotional toll, that was far worse. Maria's body stayed on Everest for a few more weeks before her family was finally able to bring her down and lay her to rest. Rob survived, but survival came with scars that went far beyond what the eye could see. To this day, he struggles to talk about those final hours. Just hearing him speak about Maria, it stays with you. The pain in his voice, the guilt, the heartbreak, it's all still there. He said once, he still can't look at pictures of her because it just breaks his heart. But there's one thing Maria said often that Rob never forgot. To fail is one thing, to quit is another, and I am no quitter. Those words echo louder now than ever. On that mountain, Maria didn't quit. She gave everything she had to the very end.